This is GKW. Welcome back to another episode. I'm Gabe Neitzel from ESPN Milwaukee, along with Jonathan Hood. You know Jay Hood from ESPN 1000 in Chicago, and Brian Rowitz from ESPN West Palm. Boys, the one thing that the pro wrestling world is abuzz about, and it kind of leaked out before it was officially announced yesterday, but a mega show, a super show is coming to the United Center in Chicago, Jay Hood's town. So now I'm going to have to go down by Jay Hood. Hopefully he lets me in. I mean, again, we're still working on making sure Jay Hood gets the proper paperwork so he can come from Chicago across the state lines into the great city of Milwaukee for the AEW show. That's just a few days before this. But New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW presenting Forbidden Door. It's going to be a mega show, and they're obviously expecting a large crowd because they're getting the United Center. They've only done this one other time, and that was for the first dance. It was for CM Punk. They sold it out, and I don't think they're going to have any issues selling this one out as well because Chicago, it is a great pro wrestling town. They fill up arenas. They get excited for big stuff like this, and Jay Hood is going to be the one leading the charge through the doors when they finally open them on June 26th for Forbidden Door.
I cannot wait, and I'm so excited that we're going to have this joint show. And guys, it's going to be sold out immediately, right? United Center, it's going to be 20,000 people there. It's going to be great. So I can't wait for it. I'm just so happy to see that. I thought the announcement was interesting because Tony Khan usually is really hyped and he wants to say everything that happened. And here comes Adam Cole making ultimately the announcement. So guys, I think this is going to be fun. And it's typical Tony Khan, right? He loves big announcements, and that's a big one. The relationship with New Japan and AEW is only going to help both sides. What I'm interested in right now, Brian, is the booking on how this is all going to work. Because when you got two promoters, you got to figure out who's going to go over. And so that's why this is going to be big in June.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, everyone mocks Tony for the major announcements because it's every other week we have a major announcement. This one classifies as major. Like, you get those two companies together, they're going to sell out that arena. That is a big deal. The other positive, you mentioned the Adam Cole part. We talked about last week. I was worried what a second loss to Hangman meant for him. Last night showed it's fine. It didn't matter. Like, he was right there, front and center. It was such a big moment. Booking is definitely going to be an interesting part, and who goes over. Does that count in the AEW win-loss column? We don't know that yet either.
Oh,
it's a good angle to think about. And,
yeah.
Well, so speaking of booking decisions, it was interesting. I wish I could have gone to the show, did not. Was able to purchase it, and I watched the Windy City Riot, the first New Japan Pro Wrestling show ever to hit Chicago. There were, 5,000 people at the arena? Jay Hood, you were there.
yes.
And the main event had an interesting decision at the end. I don't know if it was an actual botch. It was confusing watching it. I can't imagine what it was like watching live and being in the arena for that. And that's just that's two guys that are in New Japan Pro Wrestling with Mox as the Death Rider going up against Will Ospreay. So the booking stuff is certainly going to be interesting. But what was it like being there for the first ever New Japan Pro Wrestling show in Chicago?
Well, you guys know I was very excited to see New Japan because the first time I've seen it in person, that was cool. I'm glad it was at the Odeum in Villa Park because ultimately, guys, I was at the last event in that old barn. I'm so glad they're going to tear that place down. I sent you guys the video of the crowd, right? So just one line going into the Odeum. I mean, that was the worst. One line. Usually you go to one of these medium-sized buildings or big buildings and there's 4 or 5 doors open. They take your ticket and then you're off on your – it was one line all the way around the parking lot. People stood out there for at least an hour and a half to try to get in because there was just one line. That was brutal. But once that you were in, though, there was excitement because people knew that this was the last event, really last big event at the Odeum. And I just thought that just to see the New Japan stars out there, to see Jay White against Shooter, that was really good to see him because that was the first time I saw Jay White in person. To see Ishii and Suzuki, a match I've seen on YouTube a ton, right, or on New Japan World, and to be able to see that in person, I mean, that's a great match to see. So I really enjoyed that. And just to see Moxley, the response that Moxley got, and to see him against Will Ospreay, it was just really, really great. So the crowd was great. It was also a great Chicago street fight, probably one of the best I've seen in person. It was really, really physical. And because of Chicago, it was a wild crowd. So because of what I saw on Saturday, I'm looking forward to now what we're going to see in Chicago at the United Center.
And I think it's also cool from a New Japan standpoint that they almost get another shot at it. The last time it was sort of a super card, it was Ring of Honor, it was the Garden, they sold it out. That's something you can always celebrate. But it also was on the backs of a bunch of guys that weren't on that show. The Bucks weren't there. Kenny wasn't there. Cody wasn't there. So now they get another shot at it. Like, to be there with AEW, I think it'll be cool for them to get that spotlight and sell out something like the United Center, which will actually be, I assume, their guys, because whoever's going to be there today should still be there in June, but I guess you never know for sure.
So what matches? Like, when you heard this announcement, when you heard that it was coming, when it started leaking out, what did you start fantasy booking? Because I know the first one that I fantasy booked, and it's probably the same one everybody has. CM Punk versus Kenta. It's got to be GTS versus GTS. Go to sleep versus go to sleep. I think you got to do Punk versus Kenta. Kenta's already been begging for it on social media. That was the first one that I checked off my sheet right away. That's the one I want to see. That's what I think they should do at the United Center.
As a tag team mark, I'm going definitely FTR against Tama and Tonga Loa. I want to see, though, the kids of Haku. So there's been a lot of conjecture in wrestling media on whether or not Haku's kids are the best or one of the best tag teams in the world. Well, take on FTR, who's red hot right now, right? Getting it done in AAA in Mexico, getting it done in AEW. It took a while for FTR to get their footing. Once they lost to the Young Bucks the first time, people thought, okay, now you're going to get buried. But they actually beat the Young Bucks. So I want to see Haku's kids, Tama and Tanga, take on FTR. I think that's going to be a terrific tag team match.
So I'm going to take sort of from both of yours and go different routes. I thought Punk versus Ospreay. I think the two of them, it's something we've never really gone that route. I think that would be fun. And from an FTR standpoint, it might be cheating a little bit, but can we get FTR and the Golden Lovers? Will Kenny be back by then? Can we do that route, or is that cheating?
You can't. No, you
No?
can't do that. No, I need my dream match now. I already got the Briscoes and FTR, right? And I think all three of us can agree at the Supercard of Honor that in Garland, Texas, that was a tremendous match. Really, really good, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
fantastic.
Match of the weekend.
So I just need a true tag team against another true tag team. I need to see that. Because FTR right now is on a roll. I've seen the Young Bucks take on some of the top talent in New Japan, but FTR, I think that's a different level.
I just assumed that we were going to get a Mox versus Ospreay rematch, just because it was such a messy ending. And we're going to be giving, at the end of the show, we're going to go through what we thought were the best matches of the weekend. And this, to me, would have been the best match of the weekend had it had more of a definitive ending. It was such an awesome match. And you got Moxley, trying all these different things. He tries the blackout. He takes Seth Rollins' finisher and tries to put away Ospreay with that. And finally, he puts him down, ref counts to 3, but then he rolls him over and still chokes him out, and Ospreay taps out. So it's confusing. It's just, and Ospreay clearly would want the rematch. I just assumed that this would be the natural progression for them to have that rematch on this card.
I will give that match credit because I saw 2 matches in one. If Moxley's there, that's not going to be a catch-as-catch-can classic. He's just going to try to, be outside and throw chairs and bleed and all that. And his face was a crimson mask. He bled in Chicago on Saturday. But that false finish, it threw everybody off guard, Gabe, because people didn't understand. It was a really good match. It was Moxley's kind of match, and then it was Ospreay's kind of match because he was able to get some momentum, does the high flying that he usually does. And then that false finish, and it confused everybody because they didn't know if the referee screwed up, if it was a pinfall. Ospreay's complaining about it on social media. So, yeah, I think that's going to be a rematch too. And I guess, guys, if we're going to talk about the Blackpool Club, then we've got to see Okada against Brian Danielson.
Yep.
Right?
Well, what about the BCC versus the Bullet Club? And you just do it that way. You do a 6-man versus any variation of the Bullet Club that night.
You certainly could. I mean, it's definitely that's what I've been trying to figure out. Do you want to do something just BCC? Right. But Brian Danielson's also talked about how he wants to have some of these dream matches. Right. And I think some of the natural, when you put together a super show like this, some of it is you naturally want to do what they do at Survivor Series. You want, we could do all these champion versus champion matches. We could do Okada versus Hangman. We could do, and I don't think that's what I want this to be. And I would more want Bryan Danielson as a singles competitor. I want to see the American Dragon go up against Okada because I think Bryan Danielson is the best technical wrestler. He's the best guy in the ring in the world to me. And I want to see him go up against the best in New Japan and have that dream matchup.
Yeah, Brian, and the whole thing with Bryan Danielson is, and I talked to Mark Henry about this. You remember that 60-minute classic he had, that matchup he had against Hangman Page?
Mm-hmm.
I asked him, I said, well, how was Bryan afterwards? He goes, he could have won another 30. He was standing around in the back just talking to guys and asking Mark, so what do you think of the match? I felt like we could have, and he's like, and Mark's like, you mean you're not tired? You went 60 minutes. He goes, no, I'm good. I feel we could have done so. He's just talking to people, walking around with a cup of coffee, and I'm just like, you went 60 minutes.
He's critiquing the match seconds after it happened.
He just walked around with a cup of coffee and I could have maybe done a flip there or maybe, and Mark's just like, you're not passed out on the floor. I'm like, how did this happen? Right? I've seen 60-minute matches where Ric Flair, as great as his cardio was in his prime, he was exhausted after 60 minutes, man, because it was punishment. I mean, that was a physical match, but that's why I guess I do agree, Gabe. I do want to see Bryan in a singles match of his dreams because it's going to be a classic, whomever it's going to be.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Okada and Bryan, we know it's going to be an 8-star match, but
yeah.
I think the other thing they have to worry about, how do you sell this pay-per-view? Are we going to see New Japan every week? And if we're going to see that and we see building towards, storyline aspect, what about Okada versus an MJF? And MJF sort of gets that shine, and he gets to cut promos and sort of build heat that way, and you build towards something like that.
That's where I start to run the AEW roster, and we've had this discussion about how deep it is.
Right.
There are going to be AEW legitimate stars who are featured each and every week on one of their television shows.
Yep.
That are going to be left off this card just because.
Guys, we haven't mentioned the world champion right now. We haven't mentioned Hangman yet.
Hangman has to be on the card. He is the world champion of AEW. They've got to find a spot for him somewhere. Which is again why the easy thing to do is okay, he can do Okada, then we can match up the tag team champion and do different things like that. There is a different, and I'm curious to see if they do something because currently the IWGP United States Championship is vacant. So I don't know if they do something to try to build towards that. We've seen IWGP, the U.S. title in AEW. It's been defended on AEW television between Lance Archer and Jon Moxley. So I think that there's an opportunity to try to build something towards that with AEW and New Japan stars who happen to be stateside. And maybe you can build some hype, whether it's, again, Tony Khan seems to love tournaments. So have an IWGP U.S. title tournament that maybe culminates at Forbidden Door.
It's so much talent on both sides, guys. It's going to be oh, Hangman Page, that's right. We got to get you an opponent. Okay, Fred Rosser. All right, now we move on. Right? It's here, Flip Gordon. Go ahead. He's got to have himself.
I forgot about Flip.
He's got to have himself. I agree. He's got to get himself a key match too. After all, he is the AEW champion. But it's so funny. We talk about all these wrestlers, and we just got to Hangman Page. And because here's why. It's I think every week, the three of us are starting to have more of a belief in him as champion. But against New Japan talent, we don't know what that looks like. And we don't want him to be embarrassed, right? Because the New Japan guys are about it. So that's why it's so intriguing. This fantasy booking is really, really fun.
Yeah, the other one is you imagine there needs to be some sort of breaks that night, and you need to sort of have, maybe the comedic element and things like that. I saw a match. It was supposed to be Mania weekend of 20, so it ultimately didn't happen. I believe it was supposed to be at Janela's spring break. Suzuki versus Orange Cassidy was supposed to be the match. What do we do, Suzuki and Danhausen? Come on. That'd be a great break to see those two in the ring together. That could be pretty fun.
What if Danhausen just opens up a can, just you know what? Here I go. I'm doing here we go.
Well, we're building towards Danhausen's debut. He challenged. He got in the face of Hook last night.
He did.
And he put the finger on the chest of Hook. He seemed to immediately regret it, but it seems that we're building towards that Danhausen in-ring debut on AEW.
I don't know about you guys. I'd pay a whole $40-$50 to see that one. That's a main event anywhere in the world.
Oh, yeah. Danhausen versus Hook? Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Very nice and very evil. Danhausen. We got a question here. Bill is asking how many dark matches do these guys do anymore? Because we were just kind of talking about the length of the Brian Danielson match. Not as many. I mean, AEW doesn't do house shows, so the AEW has their shows that they put on YouTube, but their megastars rarely make appearances there. Every once in a while, you might see somebody on television down there. So guys there aren't wrestling that often. WWE, I mean, they're probably doing a few on the weekends, not nearly as many as they used to, even pre-pandemic. They've really backed off of the house shows. So, I mean, somebody like, a Roman Reigns, Roman Reigns hardly ever wrestles on television. And he'll wrestle then recently it's been more like 6-man tag matches with the Usos when he does a house show. But I mean, these guys like Cody Rhodes, my guess is I saw him just tweet out not that long ago that, Friday, Saturday, Saturday, Sunday, he's going to be 2 different places leading up to Raw on Monday. So somebody like Cody's probably going to be wrestling 3 times a week. And that's on the very high
AEW. Yeah, like the fact that, Britt Baker could be a dentist most of the week and then show up on Wednesday and work a show and still, have a job. Like that's the appeal, that these guys and girls don't have to kill themselves like they used to.
You could catch a lot of these AEW wrestlers in your local market doing indies, right? Yep. I mean, because they're always around. That's where they get their weekend work in, guys. I mean, for people that don't know that's watching us or listening to us talk about the dark matches or house shows, the house show was put in place because the television was a bunch of squash matches. Everything was a squash match. You got very few angles on TV back in the day. And so once a company came into your territory, into your city, you had to go see it. I mean, the TV built up so you could be able to see the AEW come to West Palm, to see WWE come to Milwaukee, to see a certain company go to Los Angeles. So that's why it was put in place. So Bill's asking about dark matches, and I guess he's talking about house shows too, right?
Yeah.
He's talking about both. Yeah. So it's just that, I think that from Tony Khan's standpoint, to keep down cost, they're just traveling on Wednesdays, and sometimes there's a live Rampage on Friday, and then they can go home because of the cost. I don't know if there's a real need to be on the road as much anymore. I know WWE was in Erie, Pennsylvania, and Syracuse just recently. They did like a Saturday, Sunday, or Friday, Saturday, something like that to lead into Raw. But I just think that the philosophy for AEW now is, here's our team. Hey, we're coming to your city. We'll see you on Wednesday. We'll do a double taping and see you next Wednesday.
Moxley talked about like the way he can be home with family. Like he leaves early Wednesday and somehow finds the latest flight out Wednesday night, and he's back home Thursday morning. Like it's just a day away. It's not like the wrestlers we grew up with who are gone from their family 250 days a year. That doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, then Mox still finds a way because, like, that dude, he wrestled live on Friday, wrestled live on Saturday, wrestled live again on Wednesday. Like, some of those, if you want the work, if you're like someone like John Moxley, you can certainly find it and be able to find that balance, I think, just a little bit better. All right, so we talked about the biggest thing going on in the world of professional wrestling, and that, of course, is Forbidden Door coming up on June 26th at the United Center in Chicago. But the other thing we need to get to is our 3 count. The other 3 top wrestling stories we need to discuss on this week's GKW. What we have at number 1, Brian?
Guys, Triple H sat down with The Athletic and apparently spoke with them for nearly a half hour. What was your biggest takeaway from the Triple H Athletic interview?
I'm trying to figure out because he's clearly towing the company line when it comes to NXT 2.0. And NXT, the black and yellow brand, black and gold brand, whatever you want to call it, that was clearly his baby. And there is a huge portion of the wrestling population that absolutely loved NXT. They love the takeovers. And NXT 2.0 is, if you watch it on Tuesday nights, I think they're doing a pretty good job. I think they had a pretty good takeover. It was a weird time, but it had to be on WrestleMania weekend. Or stand and deliver.
There's some disagreement in the crowd here, Gabe.
What? You don't think it was a weird time? It was noon on a Saturday.
No, just the idea that you're giving NXT 2.0 credit is stunning to me.
Oh, okay. All right. That's fair.
Yes, I don't know what you're watching. Like to say that that's entertaining. That's not pro wrestling. That's barely pro wrestling. It's a AA outfit.
So he's clearly towing the company line. Triple H is about some of the kind of the talking points when it comes to NXT 2.0. And that, the plan all along was to maybe get to a model like this where you needed the legitimate stars to be on television. And I don't know if his timeline quite works out. So the one thing that I came away wondering is this indeed what Triple H wanted? And now he's saying, oh yeah, this was the plan all along? Or is he just playing along now that this is what he has to work with HBK and NXT 2.0?
I just think that Vince McMahon was pissed that AEW was kicking NXT's ass and then pulled the rug. That's what I think happened. That's what I think, because you remember it was WWE that was taking a shot at AEW first. It was Triple H at the Hall of Fame saying that AEW is a pissant company and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of like they're just trying to be a wrestling alternative. And I just think that's interesting, his perspective, because I read it on The Athletic. And I just think that some of the questions that the three of us would ask were not asked in an interview. Like the three of us would think to ask, are you pissed that you had your brand removed from you? Ultimately asking the question, you had momentum. They could go to any arena, guys, and be able to sell it out. A takeover. They weren't great at house shows, but the takeovers were always sold out. And they didn't need a WWE pay-per-view to be along with it. As a standalone takeover, they were fine because people watch it now. Can NXT 2.0 go to Allstate Arena in Chicago and sell it out? Can they go to Fiserv Forum and sell it out? Can they go to the Misner Park Arena in Boca and sell it out? No, they can't. And so I just think that when I read it, I'm like, the question I would ask is, are you upset that it changed? I read what Triple H said because he tried to make it seem like, well, we went one way and now we're going the other way. The other way sucks. It just does. And I understand that young wrestlers have to find a place to wrestle, Gabe, but the point is, though, is that you had a formula of young people and veterans, and it was getting over, and people were watching. Were you beating AEW? No. You got drummed by AEW. But it doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy the takeovers. I like 99% of the takeovers were great. They were. And Vince pulled the rug because he was mad that AEW was winning. I think that's what happened.
Yeah, 100%. Like, they had egg on their face. They're the ones that went to Wednesday. Like, it wasn't AEW came to them. They're the ones that went to TV, that went to Wednesday and said, oh, this is where we happen to be. And even in the interview, Triple H refers to 2.0 as AAA baseball. And I think that sort of, sums it up perfectly. Like, how many people are watching AAA baseball on a daily basis? Like, if it's in your hometown, if it's in your backyard, it's something fun to do, you're going to, but you're not saying, oh man, I can't wait for this game. You want to watch the Yankees, you want to watch the Red Sox, the White Sox, whoever. Like, that saying is like, hey, yeah, these guys aren't ready. But NXT, the original, the black and gold, like, that was a good team. Like, yeah, maybe they weren't the Yankees, but they were the Brewers. Like, we wanted to go see them. You wanted to see them in the postseason. And NXT 2.0 just isn't that. And like, yeah, it's the company line, but like, there's just so much in that where it's like, oh yeah, eventually these guys are going to want to come back to the biggest company. It's like, I don't know if guys look at you like that anymore.
Ultimately, like with NXT 2.0, it's not AAA because you still have those veterans at AAA that are there to help, and I know it's not about AAA, but I think about Bull Durham. You think about the character of Crash Davis in one of the most popular baseball movies of all time. He comes there to help the talent along. And maybe that's what the sending down of Dolph Ziggler to get him in a feud with Braun Breaker is. I'm not sure. But if they didn't think that they were producing stars at NXT, I think they just needed to look more inward, because you look at the roster and the best people, the people that I believe most people are watching WWE for, they were stars in NXT. Mm-hmm. Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, pretty much the entire women's division, right? Like pretty much the entire women's division was in NXT and put on, the four horsewomen put on classic match after classic match at those takeovers. So they were producing stars. There was certainly a disconnect between when some of those stars went from, NXT up to the main roster. We talked about it last week with Shinsuke Nakamura. We talked about it last week with Bobby Roode. Like, it's clearly there's some disconnect when some of those acts went up. But, Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, people who are being featured each and every week. Even Drew McIntyre, when he came back, went through NXT briefly before he came up back to Raw. So you had something that was working, and all these stars are coming from there. But you can still do your NIL deals and get Gable Steveson in there. And because Bianca Belair, I think, would be the one shining example that they would want to put up of, oh, see, this way works. We have Bianca Belair. We got this incredible athlete. We turned her into a wrestler. And I'm going to say that's probably the exception versus the rule, because even though you're not going to be grinding like they were, like we were just talking about back in the 70s and 80s, the way that Ric Flair had to grind, it's something that you have to love. Like professional wrestling, it's going to beat the crap out of you. It is going to take years off your life. And, we enjoy it as wrestling fans. And you have to love it. And if you don't love it, and if you don't love going out there, it's going to be painfully obvious to the audience, and you're not going to get the reactions that you're looking to get.
Yeah, I look at the talent, and listen. You can have any philosophy you want as a wrestling company, and clearly the talent that's in WWE right now are former athletes. Those are the ones that are trying to mold and shape into wrestlers, and a lot of them are just not very good. And I understand from what I get, it seems as though that these wrestlers that's in NXT, if they don't get over within 6 months to a year, they're going to be cut anyway. And they'll just keep bringing in new people. And I just think that the philosophy that Triple H had was better, where you had young people and you had veterans and the mixture. And I understand also the philosophy that NXT is not a touring brand anymore. It's too bad though, because
Sure.
I thought NXT in its prime was a super indie with money. That's what I thought it was. An independent company with $1 million backing, because independents sometimes they don't have the greatest lights and maybe they don't have the greatest ring, but at least under the WWE banner, NXT had that. They had everything that you needed. And Triple H tried to push the company back toward the wrestling, more so the entertainment, and the fans didn't like it, at least not in abundance, to beat AEW. So I just think that when I see some of these wrestlers, and look, I've tried to watch Joe Gacy and tried to watch Lashley. It's just a struggle, man. It's a struggle because you could see holes right through it. If it was just a Peacock only show, it's like, okay, it's on digital. But when it's on USA and you see the mistakes on USA Network, it's like, wow, that's a far cry from what we used to see NXT as.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, it's painful to watch 2.0 because you think of the black and yellow and they try and separate it. But like, the black and yellow did a good job of being the indie stars. So you have, Gargano and Ciampa main eventing and putting on, 5-star classics. But then you also got over other guys, like other stuff, notwithstanding, Velveteen Dream, someone that came up through their system. He got over and he was on those cards. And that was someone you're like, oh, look, this is something different. And then obviously, other stuff happened. But like, you're able to do both. And like, to Jay Hood's point about like those questions that were asked of Triple H, I'd love to know his opinion of how much it hurt every time he made a star and there was a star, and then they go up and, Keith Lee is now Bearcat, or Adam Cole is supposed to be a manager, or things like that. Like, what were his real feelings in those moments?
Yeah, it's, but this is the way they've decided to go. This is the way that they've decided to go with NXT. And I want to trust Triple H now that he's back. And I got to believe, going back to what we were kind of talking about before, because this is all revolving around that interview that he gave to The Athletic. I got to believe that there's some disappointment, because at least from the outside, it looks like this was taken away from you, even if the wheels were in motion. But it looks like this was taken away from you, the baby that you created, while you were sick.
Yes, I think that was the opening that Vince took. Like, oh, well, you're sick. Sorry, bye. Like, it's a little dirty.
All right, so since we're talking about Triple H, let's go around quickly before we get to number 2 in the 3 count. Does Triple H eventually take over the company, or does Vince sell it?
Ooh.
Well, based on the interview that Vince did with Pat McAfee, apparently Vince is not happy with any of his family members. That's a little nugget in that interview. I mean, I know it was a long conversation, but that's buried in there where he kind of was just like, well, my family's disappointed me, pal. And I'm paraphrasing that when I say that, but it's kind of like, yes, he's supposed to be the heir apparent, but I almost think it was a litmus test, right? Like, okay, we think that you're going to be next, run NXT, see what happens. But I think it was successful. But because they did not win the ratings on USA, Vince didn't think it was successful. And so I think that Vince looks at Triple H less than because of that experiment.
Yeah, I agree. It's unfortunate. And like, if NXT never goes to USA, they're probably in a better spot today than when they actually went to USA. Like, people would have found them. Like, those takeovers were selling out like we talked about. But yeah, I think ultimately Triple H is looked at as the failure in Vince's eyes because he couldn't beat the bingo hall company. He couldn't do what he had to do and beat them on Wednesday nights. Like, that's a disappointment to Vince.
All right, let's go on and talk about number 2 in our 3 count. What do we got, Brian?
All right, guys, we saw some heel turns and some face turns this week, but which one was the most significant from the world of pro wrestling?
So there were a number of them, and Sammy Guevara started on Saturday night at Battle of the Belts because you don't just gratuitously make out with your girlfriend unless you're a heel. Like, once I start seeing your tongue as you're kissing your girlfriend, that just means you're a bad guy. I don't make the rules. These are the rules of professional wrestling. And once you saw it, you knew that this guy was going to be turning heel. So I don't know. I understand. I think Sammy's probably better as a heel. Like, I really liked him when he was in, when he was in the heel faction with Jericho, and I think that played well. I don't know. I don't know if I'm buying into this double turn that they have going on, because Scorpio Sky, even though he's with Van Lambert, who seemingly seems to be, you align yourself with him and you're going to be a heel in AEW. I don't understand what's going on with that double turn there. And then the other one is Rhea Ripley, which I think is probably for her the best move. When your theme song starts with "This is my brutality," probably better off as a heel, because I don't think of too many baby faces and brutality. Those things typically do not intertwine. So of all of the 3 of those turns that have happened in the past week, I think Rhea Ripley, it's going to be the best for her, because she is better off as a heel instead of this baby face that she had been kind of running around and in a couple of tag teams, and she was kind of lost in the WWE women's tag team division. I think this is going to give her an opportunity to step up and challenge one of the champions here in the next 6 months in WWE.
Gabe, I think that the WWE ruined Rhea Ripley only in this regard. I think that the WrestleMania match that Rhea Ripley had with Charlotte I thought it stole the show. That was a couple years ago.
It was really good.
So I think in an empty arena match, that was the best match I thought that was on the card. You had a babyface in Rhea Ripley, a badass, where, yes, she's wearing black, and yes, she has that punk rocker attitude. It's kind of like in a Ruby Riot's kind of way, where you saw her as a little different. She wasn't this baby, squeaky baby face, but she was a badass baby face. And against Charlotte, I thought that they were onto something. But I've come to find out over the last few years, Brian, that the WWE is pretty much a heel factory. Like, they can build heels, but they can't build baby faces. Edge, one of my favorites. Edge is one of my favorites of all time. And Edge was soaring as a baby face. And you just turn him heel just because you turn him heel. You didn't have to, but you turned him heel. I still love Edge, but I just think that the persona, it could be interesting if we're going to see like a Brood 2.0. If he's going to have his own faction, that's cool. But the same thing with Damien Priest. Damien Priest, as he was in WrestleMania, was a babyface, a guy that you can really build around, right? And so now he's with Edge. He's a heel. Nikki ASH, this whole thing, same thing with Rhea Ripley, right? That we didn't see that coming. Like, okay, so definitely Rhea's going to turn now. And it was Nikki ASH, and she hasn't done anything. It's brutal.
She was at a commitment ceremony this Monday. That doesn't count as something?
No, it does.
Oh, okay.
Snooker got almost married there, so that was not bad. But the other thing too is like, and I don't know how to read this guy. Street Profits. What is that now? What's that? You mean? You talk about getting over as baby faces. The red cup, everything else. Fans are into it. They're cool. They're different. They're heels. Maybe just in this rivalry, but definitely you turn them for them to not be smiley, friendly baby faces. This is a heel factory. This company has a hard time being able to put together quality, long-lasting baby faces.
Well, I think the issue is, we talked about a little last week, is a lot of the top baby faces, they happen organically, and then the WWE goes the opposite way. So like the Red Cups, the Fandangos of the world, like, things like that, we're like, oh, no, we don't want to be a part of this. We didn't think of it. Like, no, run with it, embrace it, do something with it. And that's why, we try and stay away from the comparisons, but AEW gets credit for embracing the Sammy thing. Like, they saw the way it was going, like, it was sort of teetering that line, and the crowd's like, no, we don't like this. We don't want a part of it. So they turned him. I agree with Gabe. I don't think it needed the double switch. I think we could have moved on from Scorpio. Lambert as a face really doesn't work, but at least they embrace it and put him as a heel, and they're going that route. I agree, though, Rhea as a heel is going to work, and especially if she ends up with Edge, which the rumors are. Like, if she ends up as part of that faction, that could be a lot of fun.
Now
Yeah.
I could ride with that. Ride with that. But to answer the question, but Gabe, you're right about Sammy Guevara, right? And so, but Sammy tried to be cool heel though. It's like, for the fans that love me, thank you so much for the support for me and my girl. But for the rest of you guys, F off. And it's kind of like, well, which side are you on? Your gimmick is so bad that Dan Lambert is getting roundly cheered in Pittsburgh. Roundly cheered. And I understand for the young wrestling fan, I was telling Brian this earlier, it's like, for the young wrestling fan, they don't get it because they think Dan Lambert is like go away heat. He's Bobby Heenan. He's just doing the gimmick from in the 80s and 90s. You're supposed to hate him. But now he's going after Sammy, and people are like, yes, Dan. Yes, absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Dan,
thank you, somebody.
Dan, like, Dan Lambert.
Right.
I mean, I was surprised that Sammy got the belt back. I'm surprised that he became a 3-time TNT champ because, again, like you could easily turn him heel after he loses. And that's, you can kind of build a story that way. And now we're getting, for a company that has rarely done rematches, and when they have, I think, when you saw the Daniel Bryanson rematch with Hangman Adam Page, we just saw a rematch with the two Adams as well. But now we're getting Sammy and Scorpio like, this is 3
we don't
versus
need
3.
that.
Like I don't think we needed that much. Like once you decided to put it on Scorpio, like you needed to have Sammy lose and move on. He could have turned heel, and then Scorpio and everybody with Dan Lambert could have remained heel. Even though I know they want to get Paige Van Zant involved with Tay Conti. Like that's obviously the next step in the evolution. They have to do the mixed tag match as part of this. Which I'm excited for. I think I'm excited to see what Paige Van Zant can do in a professional wrestling ring. Especially the most significant turn to me is still Rhea, especially if she ends up as part of the Brood 2.0 or whatever we're going to end up calling the faction that Edge ends up running.
Well, to your point though, Gabe, with Paige, like we're not seeing her on TV that often though. Like they drop it in like, oh, we want the mixed tag match. Like my first reaction last night was like, but with who? Like, are they calling Lambert a woman? Like, what are they going at there? And then I was like, oh, Paige, that's right. Like, it didn't click for me right away because she's not there every week.
Just one little point about that, just quickly. Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page are doing their best work on the mic. Totally believable.
Oh, Ethan Page had a great one last night. And, I mean, how better else, I guess, to turn Scorpio than reunite him potentially with Frankie Kazarian. Like having those two have the interaction as the first ever AEW Tag Team Champions, and SCU is as over of a group that's been on the independent scene the last 5 years. When they originally got to AEW, that's a good way. I think if that's indeed the direction you're going, that makes a ton of sense to be able to reunite those guys. Let's go ahead and get to number 3 in the 3 count.
All right, guys. Last night on Dynamite, we also saw the face-to-face between Hangman and CM Punk. Is the time right for Hangman and Punk?
I think it is. I mean, I just don't know where else you go with CM Punk at this point. I like the build that they've had. He's had some good rivalries, had a really good one with MJF building up to this. And I honestly, like, whenever they decide to have this, whether it's they're able to kind of drag it out another, month or so and have it be at Double or Nothing in Vegas, I'm curious to see if they do that. It seems that's probably the direction they're going, since the only interaction they had last night was a brief stare down as they passed each other on the ramp. And I'm wondering, because it wasn't time for Hangman to drop the belt. I think putting him over Adam Cole was the right thing. Is him losing to CM Punk the right thing? Is Punk losing the right thing? I'm not sure. I honestly don't know who would benefit more from being able to walk out of this feud as the champion of AEW. I'm really curious to see where this goes.
So, guys, let me ask you a question. What is best for CM? What is the best CM Punk? Is the best CM Punk when he takes on Penta and Max Caster and Dax Harwood and Lee Moriarty, or Darby Allin or Matt Sydal, or is it when he takes on MJF or Shawn Spears or Wardlow? What's the best CM Punk?
It's the MJF side because you get the mic involved also. You get the emotion involved there.
My point is that the best CM Punk is when there's heat,
Yeah.
when there is an issue. I don't know how they're going to create the story. The only story I see is CM Punk's redemption to get back to being at the best in the world and be the heavyweight champion. But does that mean that Hangman turns heel? Does that mean, I know he's going to have aggression, but I don't know what the story is. See, I appreciate CM Punk, and I'll bring the curtain down for our show here because I interviewed QT Marshall when they came to Chicago, and he told me off the air, he goes, CM Punk chose me to wrestle on Dynamite, and I was surprised. And I said, why were you surprised? He goes, well, CM Punk says he wants to work with someone good, and he says, I want to work with you. CM Punk is just picking and choosing certain guys that's in the back, veterans or young guys, and he says, Lee Moriarty, let's go. Max Caster, because he feels like he's making those guys. And QT Marshall, it was just kind of like, you know what, here's a veteran that's been around. I want to work with you because I know that you're good. But those matches are good. The match against Dustin was fine. It told a great story. The crowd was into it in Pittsburgh. But the best match for CM Punk is when there's something on the line, not just the championship, but when there's an issue. And I don't know what the issue is going to be when he faces Hangman for the AEW championship. I don't know.
Because, and you didn't even mention Eddie Kingston in there. Like the promos that they had, like then you felt that was real. The emotion was real when they finally faced off in the ring as well, when you had the mic showdowns between Eddie and Punk.
Yeah, I agree with that part. I think, Punk's gimmick since the MJF has been, let's just have a great wrestling match every week. And, even last night when we were going into it, I was like, oh, yeah, Punk and Dustin, like, this could be fun. Like, it was a fine match. It didn't quite live up to it, but it was something different. I agree there'll be a storyline here. I think Punk sort of needs to go over here. Like, this Hangman title reign, as great as the payoff of him winning the title was, it's been a letdown since then. And, like, I was looking at today, like, he's defended the title 6 times so far, twice against Bryan, Archer, Dante Martin, and then 2 against Cole. There really hasn't been anything that memorable out of his title run. Everything leading up to it was great. Everything, when he's going to get the shot, ultimately getting the shot, ultimately getting the win. But there really hasn't been anything since then. I think Punk will elevate him during this feud, whatever the angle is, because that's what Punk does. But I think it might just be time to put it on Punk and just move the title around and then ultimately get the title back to the main event picture because it hasn't been top of the card with Hangman as the champ.
What, you don't think the buckshot lariat over Dan Lambert, that wasn't a memorable event for you?
Not quite.
It didn't do it for you? Okay, well,
you know what? I think that he's gotten better. Better. I think the matches against Bryan Danielson put him in a different stratosphere. I'm not saying that Roman Reigns is the greatest world champion that we have in wrestling today. I understand that anyone else is going to take a back seat, but I think that he's actually done fine as a heavyweight champion. Lance Archer, crazy Texas death match there. It has not been bad. I was skeptical myself when it started, but I think he's been a fine champion because every time he's in one of these matches, we saw Adam Cole at Battle on Rampage, that matchup. That was pretty good. Pretty damn good matchup. So I think that he's been fine. It's just one of those situations, guys, in which the championship is making Adam Page. That's what it is. The championship's making Hangman Page. So I don't know when this match will take place. Is this going to be the main event at the New Japan AEW show in June? Will this be Labor Day? How long will this go until we actually see the match?
Again, I think we got to see it at Double or Nothing. It'll be the main event at Double or Nothing because that's what AEW does. Their main event is always going to be their world championship. They want it to always feel important. They don't want to put it in the middle of the card. So it's going to be, to me, it'll be the main event in Vegas. And that's what they're building towards. And that to me is what makes the most sense. And
that's only a month away. So it's not going to be that crazy of a build. I think a month build could work for something that's, really being just pulled out of hey, he's number 1 contender, which I don't know if he is, but they can just pull from that.
Yeah, he beat the number 4 guy, 2 weeks ago and won again this week against the Natural. So it's easy to just artificially shoot him up to that number 1 contender spot because he's.
It's not scientific. It's not the BCS here.
I mean, I don't know. You'd have to ask Tony Khan. I guess
Okay.
if you want to, if that's one of the questions you want to ask Tony Khan anytime we happen to talk to him, then and you can ask him what the computers say about their ranking system. But it is kind of a shame because, as I said, that's going to be the main event of their pay-per-view. Like the AEW Championship is going to be. But like you said, Brian, it doesn't feel like the AEW Championship has been in the main events of AEW for a while. I don't know what is. I mean, BCC obviously has been really big. All the ROH stuff
was.
Yeah. I mean, all the ROH stuff has kind of been front and center as of late, with Singh making his debut with Samoa Joe a couple of weeks ago in the main event of Dynamite. So I'm not quite sure what the main event of AEW is right now. They've got a lot of good stuff going on, but I know for a fact it's not the AEW World Championship.
Hangman Page doesn't have to be out there every other week, though. I mean, I think you got to keep the champion special. How many title matches are we seeing for Roman Reigns on SmackDown? I think that you keep the champion fresh. That's not old school. I just think that's just good booking. You keep Page out of there to kind of save himself in that situation, right? I mean, already it's like Brian's not really 100% sure about Page as champion. Well, the best thing is to do is have him do promos and hide him. Like he gets his opportunities, but it's not the WWE formula of just rolling guys out every week and put them in the ring in tag matches, and just because now I think that AEW is really keeping Page special, and I have no problem with that.
I don't need to see that. I don't need to see the random tag matches or the random non-titles, but like I want stories. I want something like him and Brian it was okay. Like it was great matches, and that's what Hangman does. But like I want more of that. Like even part 2 of him and Cole, like while we saw him take that next step, it still felt a little unnecessary. Like I want to see something else or someone chasing him. Like I know we're not there yet, but like Wardlow chasing him and him ultimately keeping the title, like that could be fun. And Wardlow, like as over as he is right now, and maybe Hangman sort of pushes heel wise, like that could be a fun angle for the world title.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see where AEW goes with their world championship scene. So one of the things we're going to do now here on GKW is go throughout the week. We love professional wrestling, so we want to talk about the best professional wrestling matches that we saw of the past week, whether it was on a special events like the Windy City Riot from New Japan Pro Wrestling, whether it was on SmackDown or Dynamite or Rampage or Raw. We want to talk about the best matches we saw. So, Jay Hood, what was the best match that you saw since we last spoke?
Well, my friends, I would normally give you something from the actual week, starting with Sunday, or something Raw, something from AEW Dynamite, something from NXT 2.0, something like that. But I'm not going to do that. The match of the week, and I'm just going to cheat a little bit, but it's got to be Suzuki and Ishii from New Japan Riot. Guys, I never thought I'd see that in person. And I don't, I suspend my belief in knowing like how old Suzuki really is. I know that I know he's an older wrestler. Ishii's up there as well. But guys, it was the best match that was on that card. And it's not just because I never saw it in person. It was just physical, and you could feel it in there too, right? And they didn't have to fly through the ropes. They weren't doing a whole bunch of stuff. It was just two guys that are beating the hell out of each other. And I love that. And the crowd was into it too. A million chops and a lot of forearm smashes and all that. But it was the physicality that you used to get, you're used to seeing with New Japan Pro Wrestling. So to me, that was my match of the week. And maybe a close second is Brock Anderson, Lee Moriarty, and Dante Martin being buried by Blackpool. Wait a minute. I thought Dante Martin was like the next guy. They get buried like a bunch of jobbers. What the F was that?
And I thought his brother was back. Like, how did he end up in that trio? Like, how did that work out?
Is he hurt again? Like that? I mean, these are guys that you've been pushing. Like Dante Martin, Lee Moriarty.
I thought you were watching Dark Elevation. Like, I thought you were taking that. I was taking NXT 2.0. I've been brainwashed, and like I thought you were taking those the YouTube shows. I guess that we had the assignments wrong.
That's my match of the week, guys. I love that match.
I'm gonna go off the beaten path. Go down the YouTube rabbit hole or where else you can find it. Pro Wrestling Revolver. We've talked about him on this show. Swerve's house. Swerve versus Athena main evented this past weekend. Athena, formerly known as Ember Moon. That was a fun one. Those two just going toe-to-toe, Swerve getting the win. Pro Wrestling Revolver is where I first saw Swerve. It was some Mania weekend, and Swerve just gets thrown in the ladder match and does Swerve things. He can work with a broomstick, but him and Athena was a lot of fun together.
Okay, all right. Now,
Uh-oh.
this is something totally different that we have not talked about as a show. So, Roets is into intergender wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
No.
I'm out on it. I can't
don't like
do
that.
It. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I can't do it.
No. I mean, like, listen, if you can tell us about it, but that's hard to watch for me because, and listen, it's not like we haven't seen like good intergender matches. Like,
Yeah.
we can roll the clock all the way back to Jeff Jarrett in China. I mean, that matchup took
That's
place.
Former Intercontinental Champion.
That's right.
To you.
Got over, and the match got over, right? And so I get that, but that one's because Swerve's so good, and Athena it's just like it's hard for me to see that, man.
But what if it's
I don't
like
know. I'm with Gabe on that.
It's not the physical stuff. Like, it's not the Candice LeRae getting bloodied. Like, it's the, more the Swerve style. Like, they're doing flips. They're flying all over the place. That doesn't make it a little better?
Sure, but I'm still uncomfortable watching it. Like,
Okay.
I guess it makes it a little better. My uncomfortability goes from 10 to a 9. Like, it's
okay.
I'm just not going to be comfortable sitting there watching it. All right, like it's just not for me.
He's squirming in the chair.
Yeah, I am.
No, I'm with you. I'm 100%. Listen, Brian, you could send us clips of your favorite intergender matches.
Okay.
And we will try as a bit, and we will try. But that's
and I'm not
hard,
seeking
man.
it out, but it's pro wrestling. You suspend disbelief.
That's a tough one. Like and these indies that I go to sometimes in the Midwest, I don't see that match coming. All of a sudden, it's like, wait, that's a man against. I'm like, okay, let me go to the merch table. I gotta go merch. I mean,
I can
that's
suspend disbelief for a 63-year-old Sting to no sell a chair shot and then fly. Like, I can do that. I can do that all day. Ember Moon versus Swerve.
All right.
That's a
not everyone's cup of tea.
No,
this is when we start
certainly
things
not.
But please send them matches.
All right, we'll do.
I'll see if I can get somebody to like videotape me being very uncomfortable, and I'll share the videos.
Yeah.
I am with J Hood. It's Suzuki versus Ishii. I was really hoping, because I am a John Mox mark. I was really hoping it'd be Mox versus Ospreay, and honestly, it would be Mox versus Ospreay. But endings matter in these matches. If it's not a clean ending, if it's a confusing ending, if people don't know what's going on, if it's not a great ending, like, for example, Monday Night Raw, Cody Rhodes and Kevin Owens had a pretty good match that ultimately Kevin Owens decides to walk out on because he doesn't need it storyline with whatever's going on with Seth Rollins. That match doesn't have an ending. It just doesn't have that satisfactory finish. So there were a couple of matches that I wanted to put on here and I thought would be, but ultimately you're 100% right. Watching back that pay-per-view from Saturday night, the Windy City Riot, and a lot of these, if you're interested and you're a wrestling fan, like Fight TV has a lot of these kind of off the beaten path. So if you're willing to $bucks, skip the latest Marvel movie, watch this instead. Like, you can do that. And I really enjoyed the Windy City Riot. I thought it was a fun show to watch. And Suzuki versus Ishii was just a ton of fun that had a satisfying finish.
As we head into next week, is the betting favor right now the FTR Owen Memorial qualifier on Wednesday night?
Yes, like it has to be. Right? Like those two going head to head for the, as they say, the only time. Like that's gotta be a lot of fun.
When I saw the graphic, I thought they were just saying that both were in the tournament, and I was like, oh, they're facing each other. Like, that's gonna be fun.
So Dax goes over, right?
I guess. I don't know if you have to go either way.
I'm just wondering.
Double pin? They both get disqualified?
I like that double pin. I like them both, man. It's interesting that they're going. It's what's happening, guys, is that whether it's CM Punk or this FTR, they are all trying to impress Bret Hart, and I think that we're going to see Bret here at the end of this Owen Hart Cup tournament because you see it on social all the time.
Isn't Bret is managing them in an indie show? He's managing FTR in an indie show coming up here.
I don't know where it is, but then Arn is managing Brock and Pillman Jr. is who they're facing.
Yeah. So that, I mean, again, the signs are out there, and FTR has made the world know how fond they are of Bret Hart. So that's, that's FTR face turn. And I know we just put up the comment here, and Jake seems to be with me in enjoying this FTR face turn. I would just ignore their alignment with MJF at this point. Like, MJF's kind of doing his thing. It seems pretty clear that they're separated. That
they did that
MJF
sort of backstage thing. Like, it didn't need to be a huge blow off. Remember they did that whole thing where they're like, "Oh, we're gonna do our own thing." Like, I think that was enough.
Yeah. Once they fired Tully, they did that backstage thing. It's very clear that MJF and Shawn Spears are the only ones who are aligned from the Pinnacle anymore. So I don't think that you need to address it any more than you already have if you're AEW.
That was such a quick firing, man, to Tully. It was like a 30-second segment. It's like, you're fired. All right, next segment. And that was it. That was it for Tully. That was really quick, man. I couldn't believe that. But I think that we're in a great spot as wrestling fans, especially with WWE Backlash is coming around pretty soon here. And then just AEW and their maneuvering. Look, this is for someone that's a diehard fan, clearly, because New Japan talent's coming out. Here comes Jay White, and if I'm in Pittsburgh and I'm like, well, who's this guy? I mean, it's just like they're not doing a lot of explanation. They're just saying, hey, you should know this talent. You should be. So hopefully it works out for them. I just know that AEW is doing a lot of maneuvering and involving themselves with New Japan's cool, Ring of Honor as well. The Battle of Belts is what we thought. It wasn't as good as it just wasn't good. Yeah. It wasn't. And I understand that it's like what we do. They're just trying to put out content. TNT wants content. It's like, okay, here's a Battle of Belts. You need to fill an hour. Here we go. But it's like, you just remember, and I'll say this a lot, I'm sure, on the show. You can have matches. You can have dream matches. But if you don't have story, it doesn't mean anything. And WWE does a really good job of story, whether you like that or not. But they do a good job of trying to at least tell you a story and then get to it. But with AEW and New Japan and Ring of Honor, it's just a lot of talent. It's great. But at some point, you've got to hone in on some stories for us to be able to really grasp and really enjoy.
Which is, I mean, to kind of bring it all together, which is, I think they haven't told compelling stories with Hangman Adam Page. Well, some of the messages have certainly been enjoyable. The stories haven't necessarily been the best. And maybe that's why it's kind of faded to the background, because it's not the biggest story that's going on in all of AEW. Well, we're going to be looking forward to it. We're going to be watching on Friday night. We're going to be watching on Monday. We're going to be watching on Wednesday. And we're going to talk about it all again, right here next week on GK